Hey, it's Liz from No Trace. I have another fun scrap busting project for you. It is a ice cream cone shaped zipper pouch. It's the perfect size for your sewing scissors, but it would also work great for other things like pencils or markers, and it's just adorable. So let's jump in. All right, I'm going to show you the supplies that you need to make a cute ice cream cone shaped zipper pouch. And all of this information is also in the description box below this video. So just click down below there to snag the measurements. You're also going to want to snag the ice cream cone pattern piece. This is a free download on my website. The link is below this video as well. Or you could just construct your own. My pattern piece is about 10.5 inches tall. It is about 5 inches wide at the widest point of the cone. And then down here, it goes to 4 inches. And then this bottom point is a little over an inch. So if you wanted to just construct your own, absolutely do that, or snag the free download on my website. You're also gonna want a 9-inch zipper, cotton batting, fabric for the ice cream, and fabric for the cone. I'm using scraps. This is another scrap busting project. You'll also want some scraps for the liner, and you'll need a little bit of red fabric if you want to make a cherry looking loop, but you could also make the loop in a different color. So the first step is to either make or download your pattern piece and cut it out. And we are going to assemble the outer parts of the bag first. So you're going to want to find a scrap of fabric that is large enough for your ice cream. So in my case, I'm going to be using this scrap, and I'm going to put my ice cream cone right about here. And you'll want a scrap of fabric that is large enough for the actual cone part. So I'm going to be using this scrap. So these are the first two scraps that I'm going to work with. I couldn't find my scissors because I had them in my cute little pouch. Okay, so get your scissors, and you're going to want to snag the scrap that's going to be the cone. Make sure to cut it larger than you need. So I'm cherry picking this section of my scrap, and it is large enough to make the ice cream part of my cone. Okay, and even a little bit larger than I need, which is what I want. So I am going to first sew this part of fabric onto my cone fabric. Okay, so this is the very first seam. I'm just going to lay them right sides together, and I'm going to sew them with a 1/4 inch seam allowance. So now I have sewn a part that's going to be the ice cream and a part that's going to be the cone. I've sewn these together for both of the outsides of my pouch. So what we're going to do now is take our pattern piece, and you can see that there's a point where the curve ends, so the ice cream ends and the cone begins. We want to put that line where our fabrics are joined. Oh, also I did press the seams flat on the back, so it just lays a little bit more nicely. Okay, so I'm going to place my line of my pattern piece. Let me just draw it so you can see it a little better. Whoops. Of course, I'm not drawing straight. I just folded the paper, but you could also mark it there. I'm putting the line onto the line where the fabrics meet, and then I am going to trace my pattern piece. I'm working on the right side of the fabric, and none of these marks are going to show. They're all going to be lost in the seam. So I'm going to just take a moment and trace the ice cream cone out on both of these pieces, and then cut it out. And then I will show you what to do next. So hang tight. So my first two pieces are done. I cut out the front of my bag and the back of my bag. So now I'm going to take my pattern piece and I'm going to trace it onto my batting. So I'm going to get 2 ice cream cones out of my batting, and then I'm going to get my liner fabric and also get 2 ice cream cones out of my liner fabric. All 4 pieces of, well, 2 from lining and 2 from batting are now cut out. So in the next step, I'm gonna take my outer layers and I'm gonna quilt them onto the cotton batting. And what I did, you could get creative, but what I did was some diagonal lines across the cone fabric. And then I just did a really simple outline for the ice cream fabric, but feel free to get creative. And let me show you, I'll show you now how I do the quilting. I bumped up my stitch length to the longest possible length, and I'm gonna start at this spot where the 2 fabrics meet, and I'm gonna come down at more or less a kind of a 45-degree angle-ish from that corner straight down to the opposite side. And now I'm going to use this first line as a guide, and I'm going to add more diagonal lines up and down this whole cone every 5/8 of an inch, and then the whole cone will be quilted. But again, you can be creative and do a different pattern, do more lines, do them closer together, further apart, whatever works for you. These are quilted, so now we are ready to take 1 piece of liner fabric and 1 of my outer layers, and we are going to cut them in half lengthwise. So I'm going to stack these on top of each other, and I'm going to use, actually let's put these right sides together, although it doesn't really matter because this is a symmetrical pattern piece, so it should be the same both sides. I'm going to use my pattern piece, so I've just sort of folded it in half, find that center point of my pattern piece, and then I'm going to mark the middle at the top and at the bottom, and I'm going to use that to guide my cut. And I know those marks are really hard to see, but I've just marked the center there, and I'm going to use a ruler, and I'm going to cut a straight line right down the middle of these 2 pieces. I'm going to take my time. You could also use a ruler, draw the straight line, and then cut with scissors if you don't have a rotary cutter. Okay, so now I have 2 halves of my ice cream cone. I'm gonna set these aside just for a moment, and I'm gonna make the little cherry top. I'm gonna make it a little bit shorter this time. I feel like this came out a little bit larger than I want. So I am gonna use a rectangle of fabric that is 2 inches tall and 4 inches wide. If you want your loop to be smaller, you can go smaller. I'm just gonna make this a little bit shorter, but keep the same width. So I'm gonna cut out a 2x4 rectangle here. I'm using my rotary, mat, my cutting mat, to find that rectangle. It does not have to be perfect. And then we'll save this for later. There's my little rectangle. So now I'm gonna use my iron and my ironing mat to turn the rectangle into a little strap, a little bitty strap. And what I'm gonna do is fold it in half. So now it's 2x2 and press. And then I'm gonna open it up, bring these ends towards that middle crease and press it again. Probably should have gotten my water out for this, but that's okay, we can make do. And then fold it and press it one more time. So now I have a little 2x1 strap. And then I'm gonna go ahead and top stitch along the length of my little strap. Okay, my little loop is done. Now I'm going to attach the half pieces to the zipper. And I wanna make sure to sew them onto the right side of the zipper. So take a moment and just assemble it so that You can kind of see how it's gonna work when you're done. And I'm just going to center the ice cream cone onto the zipper the best that I can. And I've got some metal binder clips. Try to avoid plastic products when I can. So instead of little plastic clips, I love just standard metal office clips. Okay, so that first side is attached. Now we're gonna get the liner fabric that's been cut in half, and you want it to be right side to right side with your outer fabric. I know it's a little bit hard to see, but it's pretty sides together. And also make sure your tips are lining up at the end and at the top so that these are centered together. And then we can sew at the machine. At the machine, I have my zipper foot in place, and I also turned my stitch length down to 3 millimeters. That's like where I sew as a default. And I'm just gonna sew straight down this edge with about a 1/4 inch seam allowance. Okay, so I have half of my bag attached to one side of the zipper. I'm gonna go through the same steps and attach the other 2 pieces to this side of the zipper. So I'll be right back. Both sides are attached to the zipper. I also pressed the top and the liner fabric really well, and I top stitched the outer fabric. So now I am going to take my little loop and I am gonna clip it onto the top edge of my zipper. And it's a little bit bulky, partly because of the fabric that I'm using, but also partly just because there's a lot going on right here. So I am gonna clip it in place. And then I'm gonna open my zipper up a bit, at least halfway. And now we can start putting all of the other layers together. So we're gonna put the other outside on top of the zipper. Then we're gonna add in the other piece of liner fabric. This is gonna go wrong side to wrong side, which feels kind of weird, but I promise it's the way to do it. And now I'm gonna go around and pin all the way around, and then I will take it to the machine and I'm gonna sew it with about 3/8 inch seam allowance or so. I wanna make sure I'm sewing this side up so that I make sure to get my loop as I go around this curved edge. All right, I'll show you how I sew all these edges together. I wanna take the pins out as I sew and make sure that all my layers are laying nice and flat. And again, I'm gonna go with about 3/8 of an inch seam allowance. As I get near the bottom edge, I'm gonna just kind of follow a curve and then go straight across the zipper here. Let me show you. So I'm going to take my time, create a nice little curve, and then I'm just going to go straight across. And I'm actually going to reinforce that little spot. And then again, a little curve, and then just keep going. Okay, now I'm getting near the top of my zipper, so I'm gonna take my clip away. And I'm gonna keep following the curve here, but I need to make sure I get my loop and my zipper. So you might have to pause here and fiddle a little bit. And this part is bulky, so take your time. I broke a needle the first time I made one of these, so take your time. And then I'm also going to reinforce this spot with some extra stitches. All right, I also want to take a moment and make sure I caught all my layers in my seam, and it looks like I did. So that's always good. And now I'm gonna trim the seam down. I'm gonna cut some of this extra fabric off and then do a zigzag stitch all the way around these raw edges. All right, my zigzag stitching is done all the way around. And now I'm just going to turn it right side out and let's see how it looks. I ironed it really well and here it is. Ah, it's so cute. Hey, if you're looking for more fun scrap busting projects like this one, I'd love for you to check out my membership. Just click the join button to learn more.